So good afternoon, everybody, again. Thank you for staying with us so long on Saturday evening. We have an ERC panel ahead of us. So this will be genuinely hybrid one because we have 4 panelists here in the room and 2 panelists online. So let me present all of our panelists. So we have Professor Janka Mátrai. She's Scientific Officer at ERC. We have Professor Nela Pivac. She's Senior Scientist with tenure at Ruđer Bošković Institute, and she's also member of ERC Peer Review Panel. We have Professor Sunčana Smith. She is employed at the Division of Physical Chemistry, also at Institute Ruđer Bošković, and she is awardee of ERC Starting Grant. We have Dr. Jadranka Šepić. She's Assistant Professor at the Faculty of Science in University of Split, and she's joining us online. She is ERC Starting Grant awardee. And here we also have Dr. Jeremy Walton. He is currently at Max Planck Institute for the Study of Religious and Ethnic Diversity. However, he is ERC Consolidator Grant awardee. And here in the panel we also have our Anna Butković. She is our ERC NCP, and she works at Ministry of Science and Education of the Republic of Croatia. So when I was gathering this panel, my idea was to try to find people who had grants or have grants, but also to get somebody from the ERC to get info from both sides of coins, from those who applied and got grant, but also from those who are handling our applications, and maybe get some tips and infos from that side also. And the second thing I wanted to share with you, that while I was looking for potential panelists, I was very happy to find out that we're not so bad in ERC awardees. So we have everything. We have in start and consolidators and advanced. Professor Janić is advanced. And we also have incoming and returning researchers to Croatia. So I think we have to be very proud of them, and I would like to applaud them all at the beginning. So just the order of our panelists, we decided to start with more administrative stuff. So we will start with Dr. Mátrai. She's Scientific Officer of ERC, and she will give us an introduction to ERC itself and the application procedures. So Dr. Mátrai, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for staying till the end and for this very kind introduction. Let me start with sharing my presentation. Okay, I believe you see my presentation in full presentation mode. So, indeed, I am a scientific officer at the European Research Council's executive agency, and I really would like to thank this unique opportunity that I can be here today and give my talk about the European Research Council funding opportunities under Horizon Europe, which is our newest framework program, to such a distinguished audience. As a scientific officer, I'm working in 2 panels. I am in the life sciences domain, and the panels I'm working in is the neurosciences and also bioinformatics, as well as I'm a member of a team which deals with widening participation issues, and I will talk about that later during my presentation. So just to locate the European Research Council, so we are in the first pillar of this new framework program, which just started in 2021 and runs till 2027. And we own 17% of the total budget of this Horizon Europe framework program. And below the 3 main pillars of this program, you can see the arch, the overarching program, which is called the Widening Participation and Strengthening the European Research Area. So indeed, ERC, being part of the Excellent Science pillar, is supporting excellence in frontier research and supports the independence and the mobility of the researchers who obtain our grants, regardless of their age, nationality, field of research in Europe and associated countries. I highlighted next to the word excellence also independence and mobility, because these are 2 very important terms, and I would like to explain them a bit more in more details. So we support independence, but we also help our scientists who gain our grants to develop the independent scientific career. And of course, independence is to some extent linked to mobility, but not always. And we can elaborate on that later during the question and answer session. And I would like to emphasize that we don't require mobility as an eligibility criteria for our grants, but of course, our grants are owned by the researchers and they are free to go wherever they want with the grant, given that they stay in Europe and associated grantees to some level of percentages, because that also depending on the grant they obtain. And we fund all fields of research, which is investigator-driven, bottom-up, and has a groundbreaking, high-risk, high-gain character. And of course, we support the creative freedom and the new ideas of our grantees. So just to set maybe some misconceptions right, contrary to what you may think, indeed ERC funds frontier research, but it's not only basic research. We very much welcome also applications from the fields of applied and translational research. So we fund both main groups within frontier research. Some of our applicants who would like to apply to ERC grant think that the budget what we distribute to the different panels in which the applications are evaluated, and I will introduce these panels in a later slide, distributed among these panels based on some kind of preference. But this is not true. We don't have any preset preference or condition based on which we distribute the budget. It is distributed according to demand. So if there are more applications coming in to a certain panel, for example, the neuroscience panel in that given year, then more money will be allocated to that panel. Our applicants, but I believe that whoever opened an ERC application program knows that we have descriptors, and some of our applicants asked us during meetings and conferences whether these descriptors represent ERC scientific priorities, and we want to somehow highlight the direction in which we would like to tune the applications and the thinking of our applicants. This is absolutely not true again, and I would like to emphasize that our descriptors do not represent any scientific priorities. They are guidelines, mostly administrative, in fact, in order to make the applicant's life easier and also our lives easier on the evaluation side, to be able to group and to categorize the applications and then to proceed with the evaluation. The success rates of ERC is around 12-13% for each of the individual single PI grants, which we call the main ERC grants, and around 8% for the synergy grant. While we know that this is a rather low number, I would like to emphasize another characteristic of this success rate, and that is that it is flat across the whole period of the call. And under period, I understand the eligibility window of the call. So if a starting grantee applies at the beginning of the eligibility window, they have equal percentage of chance to gain a grant as compared to if somebody applies at the end of the eligibility window. And this flatness of this graph was shown across many, many years. So the next point is the publication record. And indeed, just reflecting also to what was discussed in the previous session, ERC is moving towards the DORA declaration, which I am happy to provide my presentation to anybody who is interested, and I included here a link. And just to put it in a nutshell, so in the DORA declaration, of course, what is described is not the complete abolishment of impact factors, but rather not to put the focus during an evaluation of a candidate and an application only and exclusively on the impact factor, but rather to consider the CV of the applicant and the application in a holistic way and include other parameters when evaluating it. And finally, a very important point, the host institution, wherever the candidate would like to go to conduct the research with which he or she is applying, is not an evaluation criterion. It's absolutely up to the applicant to decide which host institution they are applying with. And that's only important for administrative purposes. We need a document from the host institution at the moment of application that they are ready to host the research if the applicant receives the grant. But any moment, even before the grant agreement is drafted, the applicant can change their mind and can go to another host institution, provided that that host institution agrees, of course. So our evaluation criterion is basically just excellence, and we measure excellence along two directions. One is being the research project, and the other is the applicant, the principal investigator. And during the evaluation of the application, we evaluate the groundbreaking nature, the potential impact, and the scientific approach that is described in the research project. And when we evaluate the applicant, then we evaluate the intellectual capacity, creativity, and commitment to the research project. And so again, just to highlight that, of course, at this stage, we don't care about the host institution. It's purely for the administrative purposes that this document needs to be there. Here I indicate our main grants, but about the starting and consolidator grant, Anna is going to talk about in her presentation that will come just after my presentation. I just would like to show that we have, of course, also the advanced grant, the third main single PI grant. And this is different from the first two because we don't anymore have a year defined eligibility window, but we check of the last 2 years of track record of our applicants. And considering the budget, this is the grant which has the highest budget, 2.5 million, which can be extended as for any of the other course also with an extra million, depending on various parameters. For example, whether the applicant is relocating from outside of Europe back to Europe, or requires an additional budget for large equipment, field work, etc. This is very well described in our work program. Next to the main grants, we have two other grants here at the bottom, the proof of concept and the synergy grant. The proof of concept is a totally different grant in terms of scope and money that is given as compared to the first three. We here, and also the idea is that we give this grant to our grantees. So only a person who already owns one of the other grants can apply to a proof of concept grant. And this is just to help the grantee to push an idea that has a marketable angle towards the market, towards the valorization of that idea. And the synergy grant is again very different from all the rest, because this is not a single PI grant. This is a consortium grant where 2 to 4 PIs apply. And very important is that one of the PIs can come from outside of Europe. This grant, the minimum, the typical window for which the grant is required is 6 years. This can also be extended. Some of our applicants apply for shorter years, but it's not shorter period, but it's not very typical. And the budget is 10 million, which again can be extended depending on special circumstances. And briefly, I just mentioned here also how we evaluate our proposals. And again, I'm not going to go into much details here because Anna will cover this, but I would like to highlight one important thing, also reflecting to one of the questions we received from the audience. I believe it was Tanya who asked this question, how our panels are composed and how do we ensure that applications coming from widening participation countries, for example, are really understood, and there are panel members who understand such a CV and the research that is proposed, and sometimes the special circumstances that are present in these countries. And so our panels, we have 27 panels, and they are grouped along the 3 main research domains: physical sciences and engineering, 11 panels, life sciences, 9 panels, and social sciences and humanities, 7 panels. And this, I would just like to highlight that in the physical sciences and engineering and social sciences, the 7th and the 11th panel are new in the Horizon Europe program. And so they are composed of international peer reviewers, and we really aim at inclusiveness and heterogeneity from many points of view, gender, geographical location, and of course the scientific fields that they represent. And we always assign multiple numbers of evaluators for one proposal so that there can be a very real discussion of the proposal and the CV of the applicant. Once the applicant is passing to the second stage of the evaluation, then additionally to this selection of panel of peer reviewers, we invite external or remote reviewers who are specialists in the field. These remote reviewers are selected in the step 1 evaluation meeting by the panel itself, so the professors who are and the experts who are present in the panel, and they are selected based on their expertise, and so to match all the specific angles, scientific angles of that given proposal. And they will not participate in the panel meeting, but they send in the evaluation through our web portal. And of course, we include the evaluation in the final panel meeting and discussion before the final verdict is given to a proposal. This is a brief overview of our call calendar, and please visit our website for more details. So I just would like to highlight that soon our ERC grant for the 2020 year 2020 will open on the 23rd of September, and the closest deadline for what is coming is for the Synergy grant at the 10th of November this year. What is new in the 2020 program? So just in bullet points, we will have the Synergy grant fully back. And we will continue, of course, with the proof of concept funding. We will have 4 rounds in 2022. We will continue also with the public engagement with research award for our ERC grantees. The price is again €10,000 for each category. And these categories are again involved for citizen science, inspire for public outreach, and influence for media and policy. And the opening for this will be on the 5th of October in 2021, so this year. New in the 2022 work program is the gender equality plans. This is in Annex 5. And so just very briefly, to be eligible, the host institutes must have a gender equality plan or equivalent strategic document in place. And for the details, please visit our work program in Annex 5. And the last point is that we will have in the Part B1 document, and this will also be explained by Anna, what is the Part B1 document. Our applicants can describe any specific situation caused by the pandemic and that which had a negative impact on their CV or their track record, and this will be taken into account during the evaluation. Now about the success rates. Here you can see the success rates based on the previous program, so the Horizon 2020. And you can see the grouping based on the EU15, the EU13, which are the widening participation and the associated countries. And I indicated Croatia with the orange color. And the numbers above the columns are in percentages. This is the success rate. So the average success rate on the whole European level is between 12 and 13% for the single PI, the 3 main grants. You can see that some countries are above that, and you can see that some countries are below the average. When we analyze the performance of the widening participation countries, it's not difficult to see from this graph, and we all know this, that our success rates are lower than the average of the European average. And so we want to understand why is that, and what we can just start from the very basics. What we can see is that not only the success rates are lower, but our application rates are also much lower. So sometimes up to 50-fold lower, depending on which widening participation country we are talking about, and depending on to which EU15 country we compare it. But if we compare the two furthest away, then it can be up to 50%, 50-fold difference. About various reasons, there are two very good studies I indicated here under this map. These studies are called the Widening Participation 2018 STOA and the Widening Participation 2020 STOA studies. Again, I can provide a link if anybody is interested. These studies are a statistical analysis as well as studies based on questionnaires on the different programs and actions that were provided and developed during the Horizon 2020 framework program to somehow tackle the problems and to mitigate the problems that the widening participation countries face, and the result of these actions and what we need to do in the future. Some suggestions and some brainstorming is present in these two studies. And indeed, we have also actions both in ERC but also across the whole new work program, the Horizon Europe, and it's just a puzzle piece of the different pieces of these programs. And now I'm just going to highlight some of the ERC actions, because we believe that indeed excellence is everywhere. And I fully agree with Professor Barisic that our students, our researchers coming from the widening participation countries are really excellent and they perform very well. And these two studies, the STOA 2018 and 2020, came to the same conclusion, perform very well in the EU 15 countries. And this is not a surprise. We experience it ourselves as well without actually looking into these studies. And so what are the reasons? And the reasons are in few bullet points again, and this is non-exhaustive, of course, that there is a lack of experience and capacity and not a lack of excellence. There is a need for better use of the existing infrastructures in these countries. And besides all the European level actions, also local reforms, policy and institutional reforms, mobilization of the potential, investments, creating and exploiting the pockets of excellence are vitally important in these countries. In addition, improving the networking with and the outreach to international actors needs to be also considered, and strengthening of the role of the higher education sector in research and innovation in these countries. And finally, to strengthen the interaction between the host institution and the NCPs in these countries. And I think this was also very much highlighted in the talk of Martina Hartl. And so at the ERC level, we also have some actions and tools in place to support our applicants coming from widening participation countries. So first of all, in our grants, dual affiliation is allowed. And so our ERC grantees are required to spend 50% of their time in Europe, which means that they can, if they want to return from a country outside of Europe, keep their position there. There is no need to burn bridges. But even within Europe, you can have dual affiliation. It's not a problem. We support, of course, with 1 million extra euro, as I already mentioned at the previous slide, startup cost for the PI who return, but also to buy major equipment, which is often lacking in widening participation countries. Then we have so-called visiting research fellowships. A number of countries fund research visits to established ERC projects in order to develop researchers' potential before they apply for their first ERC grant. And this is a requirement with this fellowship that then the one who got the fellowship will apply for an ERC grant. A new initiative is our mentoring initiative, which is really helping to identify international experts who provide face-to-face coaching and advice. So it is really pairing an expert and a future applicant. And finally, very useful, and I got this feedback from many actually successful ERC grantees, that they had a job in ERC funded teams. And this was very useful for them. They experienced a tremendous learning opportunity, and they could really benefit from it. And In this way, ERC also, of course, an ERC grant helps not only the direct recipient, but also to develop the new generation of researchers who are having a high potential then to perform well in these applications, either to the Marie Curie Sklodowska Action Fellowships or to the ERC. And so the take-home messages when you apply, and this also will be elaborated by Anna. So before you apply to any of our grants, and especially I'm targeting now our starting and consolidator grantee applicants, is that you need to understand the process and get as much as possible information. So read the documentation and check the funded project. This is all available on our websites. Discuss with ERC grantees, your peers, the national contact points, and there is massive amount of online support available. Check our evaluation criteria. Prepare the project. I must adhere in time, and check it for its originality, check for the hypothesis, whether it's clearly stipulated, have contingency plans in place and preliminary data if you have, or something that would act as a preliminary data, for example, publications from other groups, and prepare your CV, how competitive you are, but find a balance between describing your competitiveness and not to be overselling. Highlight your contributions to the papers you selected. And here I would like to add the narrative CV. So use the place to explain next to your paper what was your role in that paper and why you are the main author, either first or last author on that paper. Finally, as next step, when you apply, timing is very crucial, and also the way how you write your text. So when you have all these things, all the information collected, then it's important that you give enough time for yourself to write the proposal. It can, when talking with the grantees, they indicated several months of actually thinking and writing the proposal, and it should be reviewer friendly, because many applications are read by our reviewers, and the synopsis is the part B1, which should be impeccable, because this is the only document that is read in the step 1 evaluation phase. And please be aware of the deadlines, and I'll emphasize again, do not rush your application. Give enough time for yourself to prepare and then to actually write it. If you are selected, then of course our heartfelt congratulations, because this is fantastic, and you need to prepare then for the interview. And very important, as also was highlighted by our first speaker, mock interviews. Ask for help, again, in your lab, together with the NCPs. It is proven that this help that you get in this way will increase your chances. And so to close my presentation, please stay motivated. Our grants are extremely prestigious. We are aware of that. But we also know that we have many grantees who succeeded at successive reapplications. So please don't give up if you fail for the first time. This is a slide which shows all the kind of channels via which you can get information. Our website, there are series of videos on YouTube. We call them ERC classes, which explain how to apply to our grants. And if you have any questions you would like to ask, you can ask either me directly or any other email addresses that you can find relevant on our website. And so here I finish, and I thank you for your attention, and I will be ready to take your questions.
So thank you, Dr. Mátrai. We will take questions at the end of the presentations, if you don't mind. So that's my chance to remind all of you who are watching over YouTube just to send emails on the address that you already know. And our second panelist is Dr. Anna Butković. She's our ERC NCP, that is National Contact Point. She will lead us a little bit more in details through the application procedure. And I believe if you decide to try your luck with ERC applications, she will be the first person to ask questions. So Anna, please.
Thank you, Dragomira, and good afternoon to all of you and everybody who is watching us online. And I would like to thank the organizer for devoting their this panel session to the ERC. So, as Dragomira said, I'm the first person you should contact in case you're considering applying for ERC. And today I plan to talk a little bit about some facts, some pointers how to start. I think this is going to be useful for those who are just getting to know the ERC, but also to the more advanced applicants, hopefully. And most importantly, I would like to introduce the ERC NCP support network, so you have contacts who to call or ask your questions if you are in need. And then I will focus on starting and consolidators grant to give a little overview and the process of application. I think this is very useful, so if you have any further question, we can address them here today, or you can contact me at any point later on. I will focus on starting and consolidator grants because these are the so-called junior grants, and I think they are the MCAA awardees are the most interesting in those grants. And of course, the whole national support system. Few points we should make. It is responsibility of the Ministry of Science and Education to make the whole NCP network and support system for the applicants for the whole Horizon Europe more visible. So I will talk about that a little bit. So this is the Croatia in numbers. This is the numbers of submissions and divided through the FP7 and Horizon 2020. As we can see, we have almost double in numbers, also in an eligible proposal. So we have the tendency to have more submissions and eligible proposals, so we are expecting to have more ERC grantees here in Croatia. Concerning the ERC grants, we have 6+1. This +1 is the panelist next to me, Dr. Jeremy Walton, who is our recent grantee, and he is in the process of signing the model grant agreement, so this is the +1. It is not signed yet. So we have overall 7+1, 2 starting grants, 1 consolidator grant, 2 advanced grant, 1 synergy grant, and in this synergy grant we have 2 PIs, that is principal investigators, and 1 proof of concept. The overall net contribution from the EU to the ERC PIs are 8.26 million euros, and this is only for Horizon 2020. These are also host institution with the ERC grantee. It's Ruđer Bošković Institute, University of Zagreb, University of Rijeka, and University of Split. So we are geographically diverse, and this is nice to see. And we have many Croatian ERC grantees aboard. That means that they have a host institution outside of Croatia, and the overall number is 26. So a few pointers for maybe less acquainted with the ERC funding scheme, and this is how to start. I would suggest, and everybody else I think, to read work program and information for applicants. You have all the necessary information. It is very useful, and I think that ERC is doing a great job regarding the needs of the potential applicants and providing information for the whole process. Also register in the funding and tenders portal. You can find their calls when they are open, and all the documents you need to download and fill in order to submit for the grant. Also get support from your institution. Your institution will have to sign the letter of support. You will have to submit that letter during the submission. You don't have to be employed at the institution at the moment of submission, but you will have to be employed, of course, if you get the ERC grant. We have today an example of Jeremy, who wasn't employed at the University of Rijeka, where he is bringing his ERC grant, but he submitted the letter of support from that institution. And last but not the least, contact your NCPs. I am the NCP for overall ERC at the Ministry of Science and Education, but I have also my colleagues at the Agency for Mobility for some issues that I think you will find maybe problematic in some aspects. For legal issue, you should contact my colleague Martina Kožul-Kolarić, and for financial issues regarding the budget, you can contact Sonja Lesjak. Here are their details. I will later on suggest the national portal for Horizon Europe, so you have all the details and contact for NCPs there. So this is the important to emphasize the people who will help you at the beginning during that process. Concerning starting and consolidator grant, maybe in some aspects I will overlap with my colleague Janka, who was giving you the brief introduction to all funding schemes. I will try to avoid duplication, but maybe sometimes it's not a bad thing to repeat some important things. So we have here the table with comparison between starting and consolidator grant. Of course, ERC supports excellence and excellent PIs, and the difference between those grants are the stage of their career. So the PIs who are applying for starting grant are at the beginning of their career, just starting to show their own independence. Well, whereas the PIs who are applying for consolidator grant should in some way be at the beginning of consolidating their own research and research team. It is the focus of ERC funding schemes that they are financing groundbreaking nature of scientific proposals. They are awarding the ambition, and of course they are focusing when evaluating your proposals on the feasibility of the research proposal. That means that you have to be enough ambition, but not overly ambition, and your project must be feasible. So they are checking every box in that respect. These are the numbers concerning the maximum amount and duration of the grant. You have 1.5 million for starting grant and 2 million euros for consolidator grant, both for a period of 5 years, and additional funding, as Janka explained previously, can be up to 1 million euros. And these all information are once again stated in work program, and you can check them also there. Regarding the eligibility, every time the work program is released, you have precise data regarding whether you are eligible for a certain grant. So you have the data, the dates, the cutoff dates, for example, for starting grant. PhD should be awarded from January the 1st from 2015. to 31st of December 2019, inclusive. And this is regarding the 2 to 7 years prior to the application that PhD was awarded. Whereas in the column of consolidator grant, we have the eligibility window, which is different. That means that PhD was awarded 7 to 12 years prior to the 1st January of 2021, and cutoff dates are 1st of January 2010 and to 31st of December 2014. The good news for the potential applicants for starting and consolidator grants are that the 2/3 of the overall budget is going for starting and consolidator grants. This means the overall budget for all funding schemes, and that the budget through the years for starting and consolidator grants raise over the same period and in amount of 22% and 23% respectively. I will tell you something more about the eligibility. Of course, ERC is giving the opportunity of extension of eligibility window, and in the case of maternity leave, that is 18 months per child, and this could be before or after PhD award. For paternity leave, also before or after PhD award, and for cases of national service, long-time illnesses, and this also includes the case of close member of family, child, spouse, parent, or siblings. And also if some amount of the time during the researcher's career is spent on clinical training. Regarding the host institution eligibility, the condition is that it must be based in member states, any member states in the European Union or associated country. As I already mentioned, the host institution must sign a letter of commitment in case you get the ERC grant. Also, the host institution must ensure infrastructure and capacity for PIs to independently conduct their research and carry out the project. And of course, host institution will not be assessed during the evaluation. So the focus is on principal investigator, on the researcher, and the excellence of his or her research idea. So this is the process of application. I will go into some details. As mentioned before, it's through funding and tenders portal. You can download there all the documents, and the application process of application has 3 parts. The first part, Part A, is administrative forms and abstract. This concerns the general info, ethics and security, and budget and resources. I will not go into detail to the Part A because it is considered much easier than the rest of the application, and I have limited time today, but of course you get the info at the previously mentioned documents. Regarding the Part B is documents those are the documents that are available to the members of the panel during the first step of the evaluation process. It consists of extended synopsis up to 5 pages, CV up to 2 pages, and track records up to 2 pages. So overall 9 pages. If you get through the first step, then you must congratulate yourself. You have the next step. Part B consists of scientific proposal up to 14 pages and research and time commitment 2 pages. Then, if you get through the second step of the evaluation process, then you go to the interview. For starting and consolidator grants, the mandatory supporting documents are PhD certificate, support letter from your host institution, and any documents that you need to upload to justify the request for the extension of the eligibility window. These are the steps, these are the important parts of the proposal, and I will go through them and maybe give you some tips or how you should start doing this and what is expected of you to write in these parts. So you should have in mind that extended synopsis is equally important as CV and track record, which is also part of this B1. During the first step evaluation, this is all the members of the panel will have to assess your application. So you must write this carefully. So extended synopsis should be a concise presentation of the scientific proposal. You should focus, you have limited page number, so you should focus on a groundbreaking nature of the project. This is important part, as well as feasibility and ambition. So the key elements that are evaluated, and this is not exhaustive list, but some parts, is the novelty or beyond the state of the art. So the panel members will look what is novel in your research proposal, what is beyond the state of the art, what are you going to do with this project that is not done before, and this must be presented in the extended synopsis. Once again, this is the only document that panel members will have during the first step of evaluation. So anything you want to say, you want to present yourself to the panel members, you must, regarding your scientific idea, you must state in this extended synopsis. Also, you have to address the risk assessment. This funding scheme is about high risk and high gain projects. So in the case of high risk, you must offer alternative strategies, because this is the high risk project proposals. So this is something you should demonstrate in your extended synopsis, and you should address alternative strategies, sorry, in case of some risky situation for your project. Also, it is important that ERC projects are not a collaboration. The focus is on principal investigator. Of course, you will select the team members. Of course, you will collaborate, but you are the focus of the project. You must carry the most of the scientific idea that you put in the proposal. And this must be stated clearly and also clear to the panel members. You are the focus, you are the carrier of the project, you collaborate only in those aspects where extra expertise are needed, or because the ERC is all about interdisciplinarity, you are not expert in all the areas, so you collaborate in area where you need help to carry your project. Also, during the writing of proposal, you must know your competitors. I'm sure every scientist read every reference that is written on the subject that he's concerned about. So you must be able to provide some reasons why panel members should choose you and not your competitors for this project idea. And you must be able to provide some indicators that you, regarding the starting grant, are going to be able to independently carry the project, or in the case of consolidator grant, that you are independent at the beginning of the project. Those parts of the Part B of submission are CV and track records, and it is often highlighted that they are equally important as extended synopsis. So you must, so to say, sell yourself to the panel members. You must state in the narrative version of the CV what are you as a research. And this CV may include any descriptions on some reference, any, for example, explanations of career breaks if you had one, any reference that should help you to present yourself as a researcher to the panel members. Also, it is suggested that any experience in project leading should be highlighted. Of course, regarding the starting grant, those are not necessary, but if you have collaboration, international collaboration especially, this should be stated. Regarding the track record, you are required to state for starting grant up to 5 and for advanced grant up to 10 publications in important scientific journals. And of course for starting grant at least one without the collaboration with a PhD supervisor. It is also encouraged that you state your role in the paper if the paper is co-authored, so if there are more than one author of that paper. So if you had the leading role or very important part for that paper which is in relation to the project proposal, you should clearly state that. So it is important to explain yourself fully regarding you as a scientist, you as a leader of this project idea to the panel members. Second step, evaluation, that is part B2. This will be available to the panel members during the second step, also with the previous part just mentioned. So within this part, it is important to provide the scientific proposal, as stated before, up to 14 pages. It is important to be in coherence with the part B1, that is extended synopsis. So some prefer to write this part before, and maybe our other guest today will either confirm it or have different approach. Some of them like to write the second part before, because the extended synopsis in the B1 is just the shortened version of this part. Be it as it may, it is important to be in coherence with the extended synopsis in the part B1. Of course, you must state why your project is high risk and also high gain. So this is the part where methodology is very important. You have to explain your methodology. Key elements, also not the exhaustive list, is that from this scientific proposal, it must be clear that your scientific idea is interdisciplinary, that you will have that kind of approach. Also, as in part B1, you have to address risk assessment, so provide alternative strategies. Project must be focused. It has to be not too narrow and not too broad. Language must be clear and straightforward. So, as I said, the panel members are from all interdisciplinary areas. So, it is important to write scientific proposal in a way that maybe experts who are not in your area could understand and follow your scientific proposal. And of course, the good explanation of resources, that all the collaboration and budget must be well justified. Why you are proposing those team members and why are you proposing that amount of money. It's not necessary that the higher your demands that you will get the more money. And I will conclude this part. I am running out of time. So we have in Croatia incentives for ERC applicants, for all applicants to Horizon Europe, but this is the panel for ERC applicants. We have financial incentives for activities during the first application or reapplication. Also, we have allocation of additional work posts for ERC grantees in terms of research assistant and postdoctoral fellow. And in Croatian Science Foundation, they are visiting research fellowships, which are, I think, for the pandemic, they are. I think that they will be continued very soon. And I will finish with this picture. This is the screenshot of the national portal for Horizon Europe. So you have the webpage observeuropa.hr and also functional mailbox where you can also contact us. All the relevant information are on this portal, and all the NCPs are trying to put all the information relevant for you as scientists on the web. And I will stop here. This is just the, I don't have any more time. This is just the national support system. There is not only Ministry of Science and Education, there are also other institutions who are providing support for the applicants for ERC and all the Horizon Europe. So thank you very much.
So thank you, Anna. I'm sure that anybody of you who will decide to try their luck in ERC application will write email or phone to Anna, and she will be helpful, I'm sure of it. So the last panelist in this ERC part of the ERC panel is Professor Nela Pivac. As I already told you, she is a member of the ERC peer review panel, so she maybe share some tips and tricks, what is expected from the evaluator when evaluating ERC grant. So please.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would first like to thank the organizer for inviting me here. And then second, I would like to thank first Janka and then after that Anna, because they have said almost everything I wanted to say. So I will be really, really very short. So regarding this first ERC grants, I will tell you more about my experience as ERC evaluator and what were we looking at when we were evaluating all these projects. And so we had to do the marks, awarding marks for each evaluation criteria. But on the other hand, we had to be very careful that marks should be consistent with the descriptive comments that we had to write down about everything. And then we, as evaluators, should provide explanatory comments. And so these are the criteria. So in each project, I was carefully listened to Anna especially and to Janka before. In each project, you have to have a balance between the goals and the feasibility, the ambition and the risk. So all these projects we are again repeating as have to be groundbreaking projects in nature. You have to show the ambition and also feasibility. You have some money, for example, 1 million euros. You can have extra money for after the project, 2 million for the project, but also 1 million. But then you have also to be very careful, because, you know, careful with your wishes. Because if you write down that you needed this extra kind of money because you need some kind of equipment, then sometimes evaluators can ask themselves, well, why are you proposing something for which you don't have adequate equipment? So groundbreaking nature, and there is a potential impact of the research project. So we were having both basic projects, and basic projects are going really very nice, but also some applied projects. And there also needs to be a kind of balance between them. You know, you have to have the basic part when you write the project, but at least I think that each project must have this kind of application for the human medicine, because I am in medicine. So we needed to evaluate to what extent the proposed research addresses the important challenge. So that's the first question. Then, are the objectives ambitious? And are they beyond the state of the art? So we are looking at the novel concepts and approaches and developments across the disciplines. So the project needs to be interdisciplinary. And then we also look at to what extent is the proposed research high risk and high gain. But then with that, you have to have the explanation. If there is a high risk project, then you need to have plan B or something. You need to explain quite nicely in details what do you think that the risk will be, and then after that, how would you explain everything and how will you decrease the risk. And regarding the scientific approach, it's also to what extent is the outlined scientific approach feasible, bearing in mind this high risk, high gain quality. So there are some tips for the typical reasons for the rejections of the projects. So in the research project, you need to be very focused. And when the scope is too narrow or too broad, unfocused, then the project is usually rejected. And then some projects are incremental research. So it's not novel, it's not groundbreaking, it's incremental. It will lead to some kind of increase in research, but it's not enough. And also Anna told you that two collaborative projects are not so good, and they would also be rejected because in that panel I was working, you have to have one PI. There is one applicant, and this one applicant, you evaluate the project according to the applicant, and there is only one. So collaboration is of course welcome and allowed, but with the collaboration, the applicant needs just to show that it will be some expertise that it's not present at your institution. And of course, regarding the work plan needs to be very written in details, precise, and sometimes when the work plan is not detailed enough or unclear, the projects are rejected. And regarding high risk and high gain, some projects were perfect, at least I thought about them. But the risk management was not sufficiently described. So it's also very important that you go to the high-risk project, but then you have this description how to manage the risk. And regarding the PI, I will talk about it perhaps in more detail, but sometimes PIs or applicants, they had insufficient track record. And I must say that it was the first time that I was encountered with that DORA principles. And DORA principles are in a way that you are not looking at the journals in which the publications of the applicants are published, only looking at the impact factor of the journal, which we really do use in Croatia. But the journals needs to be the best in the field. So when there are the best in the field journals, they are usually associated with very high impact factor. But you know, we were warned not to look at the impact factor of the journals when we were evaluating the PIs or the applicants. And also what was very important in my panel was that sometimes you can see from the CV that the applicant doesn't have the potential for independence. So he or she can have perfect publications, because you are, of course, looking for the publications. Also, you are looking for some kind of projects, collaborations, if he or she was leading some kind of projects, get some grants, etc. But sometimes all these projects are related to his or her, for example, supervisor of the PhD thesis. So then it's not good for the applicant. So some examples of the strengths and weaknesses which were identified by our panel members. On the green there are strengths, and in the red there are weaknesses. So for example, first, sorry for the repeating, but the project needs to be groundbreaking. So it has to have a high gain, has the potential to identify some or disentangled some two biologically relevant phenomena, to develop some new treatments. Not new treatment in the way of clinical experiment, of course, but it can be also realized, for example, with changing of the indication for already known drug for already existing therapy to some new disease. The approach must be successful and feasible, and it has to be very described in detail all the plans for that. And the concept, the scientific concept, this is the most important, must be something new, or if it's not, it should bring some novelty, otherwise the proposed validation could be questionable. So I was talking about incremental research. So there are planned experiments which are good, which are okay, which are validated, but they are not novel, and they already exist. So the utility of this project and this study is questionable. So the project must have been more ambitious. I have heard that many times in the panel discussions. And project could have expanded beyond, for example, one animal model, because you know that we model diseases using animal models, which is, of course, always with some limitations. But then if it's only one model, animal model, the question is it okay, is it validated, etc. So the work plan needs to be described in detail. So if it's not detailed or unclear, then the project will be rejected. State-of-the-art projects that propose the use of appropriate techniques and methods should be described in the work package about the work plan. And of course, when there is a lack of specification, no clear explanation on the experimental details. For example, we have got one project and the methods were completely vague. You know, we didn't know what these applicants will do, how many subjects, human subjects, how many animals in animal models, etc. So these projects are, of course, rejected. So then you have to be very clear with the endpoints, databases. For example, if there is some disease which applicant should look into and there isn't enough patients on his institution or host institution or collaborator, then there are databases. So you can use databases to enlarge sample size. Sample size is also very important. So if sample size is not enough, then there are, of course, all kinds of statistical errors that could happen. So if there is no previous work, or at least some preliminary work regarding these topics, then that's questionable that the applicant will be able to realize all the plans and aims. Or, for example, that the proposed hypothesis is too simple, or so all these are some details which applicant needs to be very careful when writing a working plan. And then, of course, the insufficient risk management is also a red flag. So this is something that the applicant needs to be very careful. How much personal time will this project take? If there are some lack of details on how the plan, how our experiments will be conducted, a combination of the tools which will provide the expected data, then a lack of some in-depth discussion of possible problems and a contingency plan, and of course the risks which are associated with experimental outcome, which we all know that there is always a risk, and assumptions, and no plan B that is offered. So regarding the principal investigator or the applicant, you have heard that there are a lot of things that we were looking at, but the questions that we needed to answer was, to what extent has the PI demonstrated the ability to propose and conduct the groundbreaking research? To what extent does the PI provide evidence of creative independent thinking? And to what extent have the achievements of the PI typically gone beyond the state of the art? So again, our experience, my experience at least. So regarding the track record, I told you I was surprised that impact factor is not a factor which should be looking into it. But the green, again, text is, are the strength. So if the project is feasible and novel, you look at the applicant's experience and expertise in similar topics and in his collaborations. And if the PI has excellent track record and expertise in multiple areas which are associated with the aims of the current proposal, or if the PI has published a number of important papers in the field, and the applicant's CV demonstrates that he has been either on education or PhD or training, or has collaborations, has been awarded with awards or projects. So these all are very good stuff, and then we think that the applicant has a very nice track record, and teaching and reviewing activities, we also look at that. So this is a good candidate for the ERC grant. However, sometimes the applicant is not visible enough in the proposed research field. So that's also a problem, because you are going to something to offer something else, not something that you have been doing with your PhD supervisor. So then it's, you need to have, for the ERC panel I was in, you need to have some kind of published data in very good, excellent journals regarding these topics. And regarding the collaboration, we were also looking at the established collaborations with international laboratories and joint publications. But we also have to be very careful if PI was not the key player, if he was only a collaborator, not the person who was at least leading and some part of this publication was his doing. And regarding the independence, it was really very something that I was also surprised, because, for example, the first warning I have got was that a PI or the applicant must not have publications with his PhD supervisor. And then we were, you know, when we were listening, we were looking to all this data. One applicant from Germany, he wrote down that in Germany it is not polite to have publications without your PhD supervisor. And you know, again, you have to have kind of balance, because you know, if you are publishing after your PhD the stuff that you were doing with your PhD supervisor, then of course, you know, but that's not something that you should apply for the ERC, because for the ERC you need to go somewhere completely new. So that independence was very, very interesting for me. And the PI must demonstrate the ability to propose and conduct the groundbreaking research. She has to have a good track record of independent publications in excellent journals. So we are not looking at the impact factor, but excellent journals have high impact factors. Funding and publications track records that strongly support the application's ability to carry out this kind of topics and project and work. And of course, again, weakness was that PI might have some excellent papers, but with his supervisor, mentor for the PhD thesis, so she does not appear as yet to have produced work as a senior author. And that was something, so this senior authorship was very important for the applicants. In my ERC panel, we looked at the papers in which applicant is first or senior or last author in these publications. So I just said that last and corresponding author was the most important thing in my ERC panel, independent of PI's PhD supervisor. Papers must be in leading journals, so you don't need to have a lot of papers, but the papers that you publish when you go to the ERC must be in the excellent journals. And in a way, you have to have some kind of excellent track record with the last senior author of the papers. And evaluators, when we evaluate papers, we must not look at the impact factors. And I wrote this down because it was really funny for me. So journals must be the best in the field. And in these papers and publications, and of course, in all the grants that the applicant was either leading or had some kind of collaboration, these all stuff in the CV show you the ability or the expertise to conduct this project, which has to be competitive. And also we were looking at finished projects, awards, grants, and also some kind of PI position in the lab. So that was my experience with ERC panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this really helpful tips and tricks, I would say, from the evaluators part. So this brings us to the second part of this panel, which is in fact learning from the good examples. That was indeed the title of the panel also. So I propose to start with Professor Anna Sunčana Smith. She's a starting grant awardee, and I know that she's also commuting between Croatia and Germany, which is quite challenging, I'm sure. So can you give us a little input on how your ERC is working, how you got your ERC?
Okay, so maybe I was actually listening to this pretty lovely presentation and very insightful, and I would probably agree to everything which was said as correct and very, very, very true. However, if you're an applicant and you listen to this, then you think, for Christ's sake, how am I ever going to write a grant, right? Like that. How am I going to do this? This is just not possible. Groundbreaking. Am I going to get a Nobel Prize? No, is this so intelligent? Am I capable of doing this? This is what you think, right? I mean, risk management. I mean, in the end of the day, I mean, we're not educated for these things, right? Especially if you're a starter. And I was a starting grant awardee, so when I wrote my first big grant, and that was indeed the ERC, then that was the question, right? And basically that's my main message here, right? It's just a grant. Okay, it is really just a grant. It's a good grant. It has to be well written, right? We're gonna polish it, but it's nothing more. It's just a grant. So just think about it. Okay, I've been working in this thing for I don't know how many years. You are the expert in the field, right? You have just maybe finished your PhD or maybe a couple of postdocs. You know, it's not your boss who has done the work. You have done the work. You know all of the little things about other papers where they claim, but it's not like that. You know all of these little holes, you know all of the inside and outside of the methodologies, what's missing and what would be really cool to have. And you just write this down. That's how you write an ERC. Now, this is about writing a project, and yes, you do talk to everybody that you know about, you show your project to as many people that you can and that you trust. Believe me, I know of several examples of the grants ending up at various big labs, and then you go and visit the lab and then, oh, look, they've been doing what I've been writing. It does happen. You can be scooped. Don't worry about it. If you have good ideas, you'll have more, right? So don't be in that sense possessive of your science, right? It's better to show it. It's better to kind of put it out. Talk about it on conferences, talk about it to your peers, show it to whoever you can, right? I don't know whether you agree, but that is my experience, and it does help. It does help clean up the thought, right? It does clean up to the thinking process to have this great idea, and then somebody says, yeah, but wasn't there a paper 3 years ago in the journal of God knows what, where they have shown that? And then you go, oh, God. Yeah, I mean, just the literature is so vast these days, it's actually not possible. And what happened to me was that when I was writing my first grant, it was not my very first grant, but the first ERC that I wrote, I actually did not know I was entering a new field, right? And I missed the key player. And the key player was on the panel. So I got there and he said to me, right, you don't even know the literature, right? I mean, I was lucky to enter the room and go and say, God. So I said, well, and it was showing some reviews, and I said, of course, and I could have put a review of Professor Blah. So, and I did have a shooting match with the guy, with that person in the actual interview, but it's okay. I mean, I did get the grant in the end. I mean, there's not, a kill argument, right? So you will not write it perfectly. It's basically not possible to write it perfectly because, if you would satisfy all of these criteria, then your grant would have 200 pages, and you can't. You have only 15 pages, and you will have to put compromises. Do I put the graph where I have preliminary data, or do I write another paragraph on the risk management? And you can't do it both. Do I write more about the motivation, or do I write more about preliminary work? I don't know. Okay? It just has to be a good grant. That's it, right? And if you don't get it, it doesn't matter. You'll take the grant, you'll slash it up into pieces and send it to one granting agency and another granting agency, and you get the money in another way. You're a scientist, right? Okay? So what? How many grants do you write a year? I don't know. You write quite a few. I mean, okay, maybe in Croatia we have this thing where we wait for the Croatian Science Foundation to give us the blessing in the life of once every 1 or 2 years. To write one grant and then potentially die or live and whatever. And I think that's the problem, right? And I think this is where the key problem comes with the Croatian ERC applicants. Now, if you got a Marie Curie fellowship, and you're eligible for the starting grant, you have enough. Basically, you do need to have to show that there was a grant under your name. If you don't have it, don't do it. You have to show that you have a paper without your supervisor, which is a big paper. Whatever this big paper in your field means, but there has to be a big paper without your previous boss. You have to be able to show that you can run a project. I mean, would you give $1.5 million to somebody who has never ran a project, never ran a student, has no idea about anything about these things? No, you wouldn't, right? I mean, it's just basic logic. Christ's sake. I mean, don't be upset that the panels just notice basic logic. They do. So think about it like that. So if you think that you can write an ERC grant, go and think, how am I going to tick the box? A big paper without my previous boss? A grant under my name? 10,000 euros is enough. I know grantees which 10,000 euros. I mean, so it doesn't have to be, that's why the Germans get it better, because there are eminent fellowships, there are Einzelantrags, which gives you 150 to 100,000 euros on a bank account with your name on it. That's the 16%, right? Rather than 3% in Croatia. So think about how you're going to go with that obstacle, but if you have the Marie Curie, you have ticked the box. You have got a competitive grant by yourself, right? And the student. A master student, a technical supervision counts, any of these types, I mean, kind of being assigned to write it down. All of these things help, and if you can tick these boxes, and you can talk to your supervisors, talk to your institutions, and go and say, well, I want to apply in a year or two, I need to tick this box, please help me do it. That's it. And just go for it. And don't be disappointed if you don't get it, because when you have acceptance rates of 11 to 13%, and actually I think this is an overstatement, to be honest, because I have followed this over the several years, particularly in the 2020 call, because there was an overshoot in the applications, on 2019 calls, right? Don't be upset at that. I mean, at these numbers, there is a certain element of luck, and you can't go around it. There may be just an evaluator that doesn't give good marks because they don't. Full stop. There is nothing you can do about it. If you get stuck with such a person, you get stuck with such a person. Move on. That's it. And writing grants is I would agree with Neven. Takes a lot of our time. It's really not fun. You much rather spend your hands in the lab and working with the students and do some calculations. It is part of life, and for the ERC it actually pays off. So just go ahead. That would be my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. I really like your attitude. I think we should all have this kind of attitude, because at the end it is a grant. Very often we do get attached to what is written, and then we feel really, really bad when we are rejected. But yeah, we should just move on and do another one. So in Split, there is Jadranka Šepić. She's assistant professor, and she's also ERC starting grant awardee. And she's studying uragans, if I'm not mistaken, in Adriatic Sea. So Jadranka, can you please describe us your ERC pathway?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And I'm sorry I was not able to come personally to Zagreb. I'm not actually studying hurricanes in the Adriatic Sea, but okay. I'm studying extreme sea levels along I would say the world coast. But for the project, it's along the European coasts. Okay, so first of all, I would agree with what Anna Sunčana just said, because as I was listening to the lecture from Professor Nela Pivac and actually how the evaluators think, I was thinking, how did I ever get this project? Because most of these things I don't think I had. So maybe I will just describe my experience in writing this grant. So first of all, after finishing my PhD, I tried to apply for Marie Curie. And then I wanted to follow all of this as was listed in this program. So you need to give science, you need to give risk assessment, how will affect you, how will this, how will that. And as now Anna said, you cannot have it all. So, but I tried to have it all. In the end, everything was very small, and the scientific part was like 1 page. And when I got my evaluation specs, what basically everyone told you, all right, but where is your science? You did not explain the science. So I said to myself, okay, next time when I apply, I will do like a huge part for the science, and everything else I will just put in some small boxes. So there came this call, and I was eligible. This was the first one I was eligible for in 2018, I guess. And it was like 3 months from the moment I saw it. And I was like, I have no time, I will not apply for this. If I apply, I will write it badly, then I will get bad grades, I will not be able to apply for the next 2 years. And I have something very important to do. And I don't even remember what this very important thing was. So I said to my husband, you know, there is this call, but no, I don't want to apply. And he was like, you have to apply. I'm certain you will have no more time next year. And if you are going to fail, better to fail this year than to fail in 2 years more. So he was very convincing, and he was like, okay, you should apply and you should do this at your work and not something else. So I decided to write my application, and I was looking for information how to write it. And now actually there is much more information, but then there was no info. I mean, there were like a couple of videos on ERC, some kind of PPTs which were very short. I could not find example of any successful grant. So basically I went through this material, and it took me maybe 2 hours to look at all of this. And I didn't even understand how. I understood, okay, the first part needs to be, I don't know, 8 pages. The second part needs to be 15 pages, and that's it. I got, oh, this is a freestyle. So I took this paper and I wrote it mostly in freestyle and put like the huge basis on how to explain the scientific part of my project. So how to explain the science, what will I do that I know to do it, that I have an idea how to do it. And then I put a lot of figures. I thought figures are very important and they show what it will all look like. So, okay, then, then I saw that you need to have some of these important points. For example, somewhere I saw this high risk, high gain. But I was like, okay, so I don't think this is really high risk, but it is high gain because it's floods in the climate change. So a new research on this, that must be high gain. So I basically explained, okay, this project is not a high risk, but I think it is high gain. And then, I don't know. Interdisciplinarity, this criteria, I'm also in some panels and I do like oceanographic and meteorology, and mostly people do not consider this to be interdisciplinarity. They think these are just 2 parts of the same science. So also, I guess I did not satisfy this interdisciplinarity criteria. What else did I wanted to say? Okay, so also one advice that is given here is that you should give your project for a lot of people to read. Actually, I did not want to do this. I don't know why. I was like, I want to do this by myself. For this first year, I want to try and see if I do it completely for myself, where will it take me? So I guess it's, nobody read it before I submitted it. And then also there is this advice that this research must be different. Well, not different from your PhD research, but okay, different. But as I was finishing my PhD and doing additional work during it, because in Croatia at that time you had 6 years, which is quite a lot of time to finish PhD. So basically while you do the PhD, you also had time to do some additional research. So this, my grant, my application actually presented a continuation of my PhD research. But I did not try to hide this. I explained that this comes from my PhD, from my previous work, that these are ideas that naturally follow. So these are new ideas, and there will be something novel, something that was not done before. But I try to convince the panel or the evaluators that I am a really expert in this because I already developed some of initial methods for this during my PhD. So I guess that was convincing. And what else did I want to say? Okay, so basically I submitted it, and what was really nice is that, I don't know, a couple of weeks, or I don't remember when, after I submitted it, I got an email from ERC administration saying that I missed some documents. No, I submitted them, but in the wrong order, or they were not all together. And they asked for my permission to put them in the way they should be composed. So I thought this was really nice. It was like they were helping me to, otherwise they could also say that this is not a correct application. And so they did a change for me. I allowed it, of course. And then I don't know how much, maybe this was in October and sometimes in March. So that's about 6 months or 5 to 6 months later, I got a positive notice. I got that I was accepted to, invited to do interview, so that I went to the second round. And I was immediately very happy with this because this meant also that, of course, I think this meant that I can also reapply next year. I don't have to wait for another year. Or that maybe this did, I think it meant this. And now for the interview, I had to do the interview online. This was before Corona, so I don't know how usual that was, but I had my personal reasons. And this interview, everybody was very polite and nice, but I thought that I did terrible. They were really very prepared for the interview. They asked a lot of tough questions. I don't know. I really felt like, you know, I was having this very, very nice conversation, very polite conversation, but that everybody was thinking, oh, she does not know what she's talking about, what she wants to do. But okay, apparently this was wrong. And so in the end, I got the project, and I don't know what to say. Then I would like to encourage everyone to apply, to try it. I would agree that this is just a grant, and the best way to get it is to apply. And I would also say that you don't need to try to, to pretend that you are something that you are not. So if you have like 10 papers with your PhD supervisor, and only when you need to have one without, and only one without, you don't need to hide it or to pretend that you are so independent. And so you are what you are, and you have your science, and you stand behind your science. And I hope if the idea is good, this should be enough. And if it's not enough and you apply, I'm sure that you will get a nice, well, not nice, you will have helpful reviews. And these reviews will help you to prepare for your next application. So this is important stuff. These reviews that you get can really help you when you prepare for your next application to understand what is important and what is not important. So again, that's it. If you have an idea, just go ahead and apply for it. That was fast.
Thank you, Jadranka. So I guess it's better, if you need to fail, it's better to fail now than in 2 years, which is also a very good attitude. And from your example, we can see that also it's important to have people who are supporting you in your private life. So that's never to be forgotten. And as we say in Croatia, šećer dolazi na kraju, cukor comes to last. So we have Jeremy Walton from Max Planck Institute for Study of Religious and Ethnic Diversity. Apparently, I was told that social sciences are not so often to get ERCs, because it's more in the life sciences. That's what I was told, but maybe I'm wrong. Obviously, I'm wrong. But then you're also coming to Croatia, so you're our incoming jewel. Please share your story with us.
Thank you so much, Dragomira. Thank you for this invitation to join you this evening. Dobar večer svima. I am indeed, in some sense, an outlier, I think, on the panel, and also perhaps in Croatia, in as much as I am coming from Germany, which is not my own background, and also as a social scientist. And I do have a little bit to say about the specific aspects of a social science application as opposed to the natural sciences and biomedical sciences. First, I'd like to simply echo the general remarks of all of the panelists, but especially the demystifying attitude that Anna and Jadranka have brought to us. I think there's a tendency to think of the ERC as some sort of manna from heaven that's showered down on researchers who are fortunate enough to receive it, but it really is only a grant. So I think demystifying this is really important. However astrological it does feel on some level once you are given a grant. So of course my own experiences, like those of any of us, are rather idiosyncratic and personal, but hopefully I can offer a few points of advice, and then I think perhaps the question and answer period is more important. I know we're already over time and your blood sugar is probably quite low, so I'll be relatively brief. But I have a few things to say about preparation, then composition of the application itself, preparation then for the interview, and then finally the evaluation process as I experienced it. If anyone's interested, I can talk about my specific research interests. My ERC grant will be a broad and interdisciplinary focus on the legacies and collective memories of the Russian, Ottoman, and Habsburg empires. And this does build off from my previous work. I've led a research group at the Max Planck Institute for the study of religious and ethnic diversity in Göttingen. So there is a sort of dynamic of continuity and discontinuity or innovation, similar to what Jadranka said. So, but first, as you're preparing to write a grant, I think really asking yourself if you really want to lead a research group or a research project of this stature is really important. It's not for everyone, right? But if you do decide, I think a couple of things to do ahead of time as you're leading up to the deadline for the application is first, to reach out to the potential host institution as soon as possible, simply because there's a lot of practical material that you'll need from them. And so in my case, the University of Rijeka will be hosting me, and fortunately I had some long-standing collegial ties there, and I was able to reach out to them. But I would say that doing this ahead of time as much as possible is worthwhile, letting your host institution know that you're thinking of this, and then establishing that sort of network of contacts. Secondly, no matter what field you're in, there will be research groups out there, starting grant, consolidator grant, or even senior grants. There will be groups out there that have received the fellowships ahead of you, and I think getting a sense for the flavor of the sort of research that's being done by ERC groups that already exist can really help you as you try to put your application together. So, you might even know colleagues and friends from your own academic autobiography who have ERC groups, so reaching out to them is really quite important. Then preparing the application. You heard a bit from Janka, I believe it was, about the different, the B2 and the B1. I believe Anna also spoke about this. I can't emphasize this enough. To some degree, I didn't follow best practices in terms of preparing my own application. I did it all very last minute.
I don't think anybody does.
I don't think anybody does, ultimately. They say give yourself 2-3 months. I think I did it in 3 weeks. So indeed, as Anna says, there's some counterexamples to the best practices. But the one thing that I did do, and I think is really crucial, is to have as a model someone's successful grant. And in this case, it was the director of one of the directors of the Max Planck Institute, where I'm at, who received a senior grant. And so, of course, the topic is quite different, but the model and the genre of writing, the way that you divide up the space in the application to your scientific goals, the innovative aspects, groundbreaking. Every time I hear this groundbreaking, I think I should have a pickaxe so I can break more ground. It's become the metaphor that dominates our lives nowadays. But really having that model to rely upon and reaching out to someone who you trust and who is hopefully generous enough to share their successful application with you, I think is key. And if I hadn't done that, I don't think, well, one never knows, but certainly my application would not have been as well structured and coherent as it was. So that's one thing. The second thing that I want to talk about in terms of composing the application is perhaps more specific to the social sciences and humanities. There's a lot of talk about collaboration, and it's interesting that Anna mentioned that it shouldn't be a collaborative project. I think this is perhaps reflecting a certain natural science bias in a lot of these grants, which is understandable, and I don't have any problem with it, frankly. But for an anthropologist, that's my degree originally, I now introduce myself as an anthropologist who had to become a historian, who wanted to be an architect. So that gives you a sense of the way in which you take on an interdisciplinary character over the trajectory of your own scholarly adventures. But for an anthropologist and for many of us in the social sciences, I think collaboration means something different. We don't work in labs. We're not typically considered to be the lackeys of our dissertation advisors or principal investigators in other grants. So in fact, it requires you to think of and this is really key when you're writing the application, to think of a concept and an object of research that does require, to some degree, collaborative methods, because you're going to have to justify why you need all of this money to hire people for a social science project that, in some ways, it might be expected could be done by an individual. And there's no reason for an individual anthropologist, however brilliant they may be, to be given 2 million euros to do something. So in my case, there are at least 9 different languages and national contexts in which we will be conducting research. This is impossible for a single social scientist to do on their own, and so there's a collaborative structure built into the concept of the project. Now, it's not collaborative in the sense that as the principal investigator, I am the main sort of innovator and constructor of the idea, and I'll be, of course, advising and leading the research of the postdoctoral scholars and doctoral students, but it is collaborative in the sense that the research required cannot be conducted by a single social scientist, and I think that's probably true of most social science grants in the ERC grants, and indeed for that matter in the Max Planck Society or the DFG or other major granting entities in Europe. Even the Croatian Science Foundation I know does like to have that for the sociologists and anthropologists whom I've spoken to. So coming up with a concept and an object of research that demands methods that span disciplines and therefore are necessarily collaborative. Often languages are also a matter to think of here. Despite being an anthropologist, there will be historians, there will be art and architectural historians, sociologists, urban studies scholars, perhaps even comparative literature scholars on the project. And I think that that's really appealing when you're being reviewed for both questions of interdisciplinarity, collaboration, and innovation. The final point that I wanted to make about the composition of the application itself is something that will echo what Jadranka said. On the one hand, you do have to break this new ground, but on the other hand, you can't entirely reinvent yourself as a scholar and an intellectual and a scientist. So I think finding the right dynamic of continuity and novelty vis-a-vis what you've done before is really key. So in my case, I've already led a research group that focuses on this question of post-imperialism and collective memories of empires, but I've expanded it to include not only new sites, but new concepts and new research questions. So there's a clear move forward. It's a consolidation as befits the consolidated grant of what I've already done, and yet it's also novel in the sense that it's opening new geographic and conceptual horizons of inquiry. So then there's the interview. I conducted my interview last year, and it was at the outset of the COVID. Well, it was last. I guess it was about a year ago. So COVID had been around a little while, but I guess the only thing to say here, and perhaps Janka can chime in on this in the question and answer, is that in the past I know most interviews have been in person in Brussels, and there's a certain, of course, comfort, I think, that comes from being in a room with other people. Indeed, it's nice to be in a room with other people here tonight after having suffered from Zoom fatigue, as I'm sure we all have at this point, perhaps over-suffered. But I did my interview by Zoom, and it is really quite disorienting in a way. The chair of your panel will say, okay, we will now begin. It's entirely cold. You have no sort of warm-up for the discussion, and then onto your screen will pop whoever is the first inquisitor. They will ask their question, and then you'll move to the next. So there's no way you can fully prepare for this, but doing a practice interview by Zoom with friends and colleagues, I think, is key. This also reminds me of one point that probably has been made already, but particularly in the social sciences, think very carefully about which of the 7 panels you choose to apply to, because oftentimes there are several different panels that might apply to your project. So I can't remember offhand what the entire roster of these panels were, but I initially was going to apply to the more historically oriented panel, and I decided that that was probably not in my best interest given that I'm not a historian by training, so it was more in the sort of study of societies that fit more closely with anthropology. But in the social sciences in particular, because there can be a lot of overlap in themes and methods, think very carefully about which of those panels you want to apply for. And I would advise applying to the one that most directly affects your disciplinary expertise in this instance. So the other thing about the interview, and this is more just sort of general interview advice, and take it and leave it as you may, but I always have a set of points that I want to make regardless of the questions that I'm asked in the interview. So I have a set of themes and arguments that I want to make that I haven't been able to make in the application itself, but I know I will be able to massage whatever question I receive in order to make those points in the interview. So in some sense, I know what I'm going to say regardless of what I'm asked. Now, of course, you don't want to seem as though you're disregarding the questions, but I think there is a way to channel them into the points that you want to make. So the interview really is as much about you drawing forth the important parts of your project and your concept as it is about addressing their concerns and anxieties. That's my own feeling about interviews, but everyone has their own way. Finally, and I'll just make a few last points so that we can get to the question and answer and then to dinner. I think echoing what Anna to my further left said, it is just a grant, and there are also afterlives to it. So even if it's unsuccessful, I think your application can certainly be retooled for other granting agencies. At this point, I'm in the process of transforming my B2 statement, and I will say, yes, I wrote the B2 first, and I think it's absolutely advisable to write the B2, which is to say the longer version of your project description first, and then you tailor it down for B1. Others have, I'm sure, done it otherwise, but this, in my experience, was the way to go. But I'm in the process of tailoring now that B2 into a review article, which will be published in a journal, eventually, hopefully one of those top-tier, high-impact, DORA principles, etc. But so, in some sense, you know, the process of writing the application should be something that is not only a means to the end of the ERC, even if that's the main end that it serves, but also something that causes you to reflect productively on whatever concept or project you hope to do. And I think even if it's unsuccessful, there's often other successes to be had. And then finally, and this is just by way of anecdote, you do receive your evaluations. I think in every case, again, maybe Janka or Anna could clarify that, but I think at every level, whether you're successful or not, you do receive the evaluations. I think I received evaluations from 6 or 7 of the members of the panel. One of them was the most devastatingly negative, destructive, and unfair evaluation I think I've ever received on anything, and that's after having many reviewer twos, as I'm sure probably you've heard the phrase, on peer-reviewed articles, who basically said this is a worthless, it's been done, it's not interesting, and it's stupid. And yet I still got the project, right? So you can say to yourself, you can at least allow for one hateful or skeptical, let's say, reviewer and still have a chance. And so I'll leave it at that, and thank you again. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you very much. So I really think we do have time for 1, 2, or 3 questions before we go to dinner. So please. Does anyone have any question? Or are we so hungry our brain isn't working anymore? Eva, do we have any questions online maybe? No? No? Okay, well I will ask one question for all our grantees, and you can just give your short comment. Would you do it again?
Having not begun my project yet, I have to say, yes, I would do it again.
Anna?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, this, okay, I mean, so depends where you work, but I mean, surely if you are stationary in Croatia, you must, because you don't, I mean, having had the grant, I mean, it is one of the most flexible and the nicest financing instrument for science. The reporting is negligible, the freedom with the grant is maximal, the way you want to turn your projects inside out during the execution of the project, you can do it. From the grant that I wrote to the work that I've done, there is probably only 20% overlap in the end of the day. I mean, I did write a kind of a logical extension. Well, you know, this paper produced an idea in a completely different field, and I just went for it and published well in the different field, and that was it. Never got, oh my God, that was not in a work plan. Never. So it is really the most flexible, the nicest. The problem goes with how you enjoy all of that, you have so much money and you can do whatever you like, you don't have to do anything else in the world, and then it stops. And how do you go from everything to, you know, not zero, because, you know, of course, I mean, you say, I mean, this is the issue, right? I mean, if you don't start working on something else after, you will collapse to zero, and then you may have to make a choice. Okay, do I really want to downscale and, you know, maybe just go on holidays for a couple of years and just process all of this in my head and, you know, write it all up, because there are so many papers which you still have to write up after the grant is finished. Principally, your PhD students will be just finishing at the end of the grant, so you all know PhD students still did not publish their paper, so there will be kind of an afterlife of the grant for maybe 2 to 3 years afterwards. somehow how are you going to do with this? How do you need to finance this? I mean, so these are things which you kind of really have to start thinking already into the third and a half year into the grant. You start thinking, okay, you have to make an executive decision. I will do this, or I will try to do this, or I'm super ambitious and I will try to spend up. And that depends on your personal choices and your personal circumstances. You will make different choices. So, but you should make your choice. I mean, otherwise the choice is going to present itself on its own, so, and you live with the consequence. That's one way to do it, just as well, right? So, but yes, I would do it. I mean, I would probably not do it one after another grant. I mean, sometimes if you're a starter, you can immediately apply for the consolidator at the end, and actually people which had the starting grant have about 30% more chance to get the consolidator. Now, I have colleagues which have done it and got it. I have colleagues which have done it and did not get it, so there is also not a guarantee that you're going to get it. The people who did not get the consolidator after the starters mostly got the comment that it is too close to the starters grant, so it has to be a new idea. But you've been just 4 or 5 years thinking on something else, so whether you can make these transitions or not so quickly, or you have some time to build up a new idea or new field or new research interest. Okay, I mean, there are also other grants which have larger volumes or whatever volume that you like, which, in a sense, I decided that I like better than immediately writing a consolidator. But yeah, I would probably, and probably I will next year submit the synergy. So,
Jadranka, any other comments for the final? We don't hear you.
Muted.
Can you hear me?
Nothing. So. Okay, we cannot hear you.
Oh, sorry. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, it's a bit better.
Okay, now?
Yes.
Sorry. Well, I don't have much to say. I am like Jeremy, only a little better because my grant has only been running for 1 year. So I didn't even write my first report yet. But okay, I would do it again. I like to write grants, applications.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the main message or take-home message is just try and do it. But don't ask me, I have 2 failures. So I'm not the person to be asked, unless you want to know the bad, what not to write. So do ask our panelists if you want to know how to write a good and successful ERC application. So I will use the opportunity to thank you again for accepting the invitation and being our panelists.
I was just going to add one last thing that I came to mind, which I imagine most of you have looked at the tenders funding portal by now, but it's the worst website ever to be designed. Don't let that stop you. You can still do it. It's a constant irritation to those of us who received the grant. I guess, every success is rewarded with further frustrations, but don't let that stop you.
Yeah, and they say that the Part A is the easiest one. Don't leave it for the last days. It's so frustrating to actually fill it in properly. And to tick all of these boxes and, write whatever stupid statements that you have to write at the end of the Part A about, whatever this, I don't know, questions about. And also, if you're an evaluator, you also have to read them, and they're always just such a poetry, which you go and says, okay, really. But you have to do it, and you maybe want to do it at least a week before the deadline. Even if you're rushing with your projects, they say, no, I'm going to fill up this stupid form and have it checked, because as you're approaching the deadline, and if you're not one of these organized people which, have taken 6 months for writing, then, stress levels will probably rise, and you don't want to kind of mess up your PhD student when the date of your PhD or something stupid like that, and be non-eligible for like a silly administrative mistake. So,
Janka, you have a question?
Yes, if I may, just for the sake of one sentence, a closing remark on behalf of ERC. I fully agree with the main conclusions that indeed, please try, that's the best way to succeed. And also, if you fail, it's a tremendous amount of learning possibility, but by just writing the grant and from the reviews that you receive. Indeed, we didn't mention with Anna, but if you fail in the first step, depending on the score you receive, you can be penalized with 1 year or 2 years of a gap before you can reapply. If you fail in the second round where you have the interview, so you receive a B score instead of an A, you don't have this penalty. And about interdisciplinarity, it really depends on the field and depending on the project you yourself write. We don't require interdisciplinarity. This is really just if you have interdisciplinary angle, that's okay. You don't have to put it by forcing your project to make it interdisciplinary. It will not increase or decrease your chances. If you have, on the other hand, interdisciplinary proposal, even in step 1, we ask so-called cross-panel reviews, which means that we ask panel members of other panels to review your proposal from that interdisciplinary angle, and in this way to increase the understanding and the success of going from step 1 to the second step of evaluation. And finally, on applied, I agree with Nela very much that there are disciplines and panels where the application side of a proposal is immediately obvious and would be very strange if that is the application angle of a research idea is not presented. But there are plenty of research fields and ideas which don't immediately have an application angle, and so we don't require that. And again, it's not our requirement and evaluation criterion to look for the application aspects and promises of a proposal. So don't be discouraged if you think that your idea or proposal doesn't have this immediate application part on the horizon. And about the independence, I would like to very much emphasize that it's a very tricky term, especially for the starting grantees. And I agree very much with Jadranka. If you don't have anything to sell on that, don't force your CV into that. Be what you are. If you have indeed 9 papers with your PhD supervisor, but because that's how your lab is constructed, and we know that in some widening participation countries, it is the case that even if it was your idea, even if you were the main lead of that research project, your supervisor, the head of the lab in which you are, will be on the paper. You can just write in the narrative part next to your publication that I was the main lead, and this is my idea, and I'm the main author of this paper, but of course your PhD supervisor, especially if you're a starting grantee, will be present. In our work program, it's very clearly written, you are the main author or without the PhD supervisor. So these are 2 categories. I understand the competition is fierce, and I understand there will be applicants who will have stellar papers in single without the PhD supervisor. But the panel gives one big emphasis really on the project. And in the context of everything is the CV evaluated. We do have applicants who won the grant with less stellar CV as compared to their competitors who were present in that call. So I just really want to remove these discouraging elements, because it's important to save every idea and every excellent proposal that might come to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we came to the end of the first day. I invite you to join us tomorrow at 9:30. We have 3 panels tomorrow. And the dinner is waiting for us. So on your right hand in the restaurant, please join us for dinner.